Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I'm going to be giving all of you a quick run through of the UI of Aseprite. So if you don't already know, Aseprite is a pixel art program. It's good for creating things such as characters, tiles that you would use for the game world, animations of your characters or objects, and other low resolution art. So when you load up Tileset in the default theme, you're going to see recent files over here. These, of course, are going to be listed chronologically and how long it has been since you have saved those files. And you can see that you may find not only .aseprite files, but other types of images .png. So generally, when you're working on a piece of art and you want to maintain all of the layers, then you would save it as a .aseprite file. And then when you're ready to export to a format that can be interpreted easily by other programs or the internet, then you would have a standard image format such as .png. Also, you can look down here, recent folders. So where you have these files being stored and saved in different folders on your computer, you can see all of those folders pop in here. So you might have hundreds of files that you've worked on, but maybe only a few dozen folders. So if you want to locate an item that you know is in one of those folders, then you can simply go down here and click and try to find any other files that are in that same folder that you've recently been working in. So let's go ahead and hit New File up here. You can also find New File in the file menu at the top left. So when you go ahead and create a new file, you'll be able to put in a width and height for your new sprite. So this can actually be any size you want, really. There's no requirement to use a low resolution for doing pixel art, but generally the lower the size of your files, the easier it's going to be to actually create your characters, because you got to remember, you have to do every single pixel one at a time. So generally trying to start with a lower resolution like 16 by 16 or 32 by 32 is recommended. So I'm going to go ahead and just put 32 in here for the width and height. And let's go ahead and hit OK. So when you have a new file created, your canvas is going to be everything inside of this checkered gray and dark gray area. This preview window is another look at whatever is on your canvas. So you can zoom both of those in and out with middle mouse wheel. So you might want to work in your main canvas area very zoomed in, but then have a zoomed out version so that you can see how it looks in the big picture. Now, sometimes you want a bigger canvas than just one frame of one character, or maybe you have a sheet that you're going to be putting many different things onto, such as a sprite sheet or a tile set. So what you can do if you still want to have a certain number of pixels on each area for every item on your screen is that you can use the grid. So if we go up to view and go down to grid here, we can see grid settings. So in that, I think the default width and height is 16 by 16, which in this case for a 32 pixel by 32 pixel canvas is going to mean it's going to be sliced into 4. Each of these gray squares is going to be that 16 by 16. So to actually see the grid, we can go to view, show, grid, or hit Control' on the keyboard. And we can see this blue outline separating the different areas in our document. So that's very handy if you want to draw 4 different things inside of one canvas. And of course, you could easily go up to a 64 by 64 pixel canvas and then a 32 by 32 pixel grid, and you'd have a similar situation. Now over here on the left, you have your color palette color selector. So you can choose any of these colors and it will be immediately made into your foreground color down here in the bottom left. So as long as you're in pencil tool mode and you can hit B in order to get in that mode, then you can left click anywhere you want to add a pixel of that color. Also, you can left click, hold shift down, and then drag the area over to another point where you want a line to end up, and it will automatically create a pixel art style line between those 2 points. So you just left click and you create all of those pixels at once. Now, of course, although you can see this color palette has quite a few selections, you can also select any color you want by just going down here to the main color tool. So here we can control how saturated the color is, how dark it should be, and then the hue selector is down here if we need to shift it between blues, greens, yellows, reds, and so on. Now, when you select a color that isn't in your palette, this little thing here will light up the exclamation mark with a red background. So you can add that to the color palette, which will be added in here. Now that won't save it automatically. It'll just be for the color palette in your working instance of Aseprite. So if you want to save a new color palette, we would go into this hamburger menu and hit Save Palette to override the current one or save palette as preset to create a new color palette that will be stored in Aseprite that you can later use for other Aseprite files. And you can also save palette as default if you want Aseprite to load these colors every single time you boot into the program. So if the default color palette isn't what you're looking for, and you shouldn't see these same colors in your first boot of Aseprite since I have a different color palette selected by default, but you can click on this button and select from the different color palettes that are installed into Aseprite by default. So here we can see the Mort versus Suggy color palette from lowspec.com. That's the one I'm currently using. And there's many other ones inside of here. Of course, it's possible to install other color palettes as well, or create your own from scratch. Of course, it's possible to use other color palettes from the internet as well, or create your own from scratch. But if it's recognized and loaded into Aseprite, then you can just select any color palette you want to use. So if I just double click here, we've got a new color palette over here on the left. Now, one really important thing in Aseprite is the layers. So down here, we can see by default, we are loaded into our file with one layer. So each layer is basically a set of changes that you've made to your canvas that are independent from other layers. So you can toggle them on and off at the same time. So if I click on this eyeball icon, it will hide everything on layer 1. But if I hit Shift N to create a new layer, I hide everything on layer 1. We can still work on layer 2. So I can draw some new pixels onto here. Let's just create a box, so something like that. Maybe I hit E to go into eraser mode. Also over here on the right are your tools. And let's just give it kind of rounded corners by deleting those corner pixels. So as you can see, layer 2 is showing while layer 1 is not, but I can show layer 1 again by clicking on the eyeball icon for layer 1. I can hide layer 2. That also applies if you want to delete a layer. So if I select layer 1 and I hit delete, then that removes everything on layer 1 without affecting layer 2. The reason layers are so important is it allows you to make changes to your document that are separate from each other, so you can delete one non-destructively to the rest of your document. So for instance, if you're making a character, you might put a separate layer for each arm and leg and body piece for that character, and then you can just edit each of those layers individually. So when you need to work on the arm, any changes you make are only going to affect that arm layer, and it won't override any of the body pixels, for instance. Now you might also notice that there is a 1 here with the current layer or all of the layers. So that is the frame. If you're going to be doing any animations for characters or other objects, then you're going to need multiple frames in order to redraw the image slightly differently in a sequence so it looks like it's moving. So we can select our frame, right click on it and hit new frame if we want to create an extra one. So you'll see here that when I create it that way, which is also the Alt-N option of creating a new frame, it copies the current frame that I created a new frame from into frame 2. So we don't start from an empty frame. We can edit it here for this little second frame for the animation. So I don't know, I'll just erase some pixels here. And now if I hit play now, well, we're going to be going through frames 1 and 2, and we can see the differences that I erased some of the pixels. But if I go to frame 2 and I right click on it and we hit new empty frame, well, that's just going to be creating a new empty one from scratch, and we can't actually see anything that was there before. So another handy tool in the UI is onion skinning. So if we click right here, then we're going to be able to see the before and after frames from where we have it currently selected. So if I click on frame 2, we can see both frame 1 and frame 3 with some alpha transparency here. So we can see it's very obvious that on frame 1, these pixels were here, but they're not there on frame 2. So that makes it easy to see the differences when you start erasing or adding pixels between the different frames. If you want to expand or shrink the onion skinning, then you can left click on the corners for the onion skinning, which only show when you have onion skinning enabled. You see how they pop up there, and you can drag it in. So if I don't want to show the before frames, I just drag this to the current frame, and now it's only going to be showing the after frames. Likewise, I can do the same to the right side. Now it's currently showing no frames but the current frame, even though onion skinning is turned on. And I can drag the left side over here to the left to show the before frames once again. So let's actually add these back in. I'm going to delete frame 3. And one example of an animation we could create is just to have like a pixel keep moving around. So I'll just erase this pixel here. I'm going to click on the current frame down here in the layer selection. Now if I want to add a new frame, I just hit Alt-N and we can erase another pixel. I'm going to actually add the first one back in. So we'll just have this blank pixel kind of move over here to the right. So I'm going to hit Alt-N. Let's do it again. Erase. Alt to do the color dropper tool. Select the color. Fill in that pixel again. Let's hit Alt-N. Fill in that one. Erase the next one. Same story. Erase. Fill. So I'm using B to go back into pencil tool, by the way. It's just easier if you learn the shortcuts. And let's keep going a couple more times. Okay, and now I have 10 frames. So let's hit play, and we can see this little animation where this pixel is kind of disappearing there. Now, obviously, when you have it playing back over and over, we can see there's a little mistake in there. So let's go kind of fix that. We can see here there should be a pixel here. So let's fill that in. So the onion skinning can be pretty handy to help you figure out where you've made mistakes and where the new frame doesn't match up well with the previous frame. We can see this frame 8 is also the same as frame 7. So I'm just going to delete frame 8, right click, do delete frame. So this only really needs to be 9 frames. And now that we've made our fixes, we can see that this little animation is playing back a lot smoother. So let's add in a new layer. I'm going to hit Shift N on the keyboard, and let's just kind of demo how layers are very helpful. So I'm going to just kind of do some zigzag stuff over this underlying box, but it won't affect it in any way, even though I'm drawing right over it. So I'm going to go to frame 1 here. Let's draw a line. Go to frame 2. We can still see the onion skinning. I don't know. Let's just keep drawing lines, and it'll kind of look like it's moving around the screen. Okay, and let's go up there, down to there, back there, and then off the screen. So now if we hit play, we can see this crazy extra animation going on top of our underlying box. But what's great is I can hide either of those layers, and once again, they're not going to be affecting each other, even though they're both going to show up in the final animation when we export it. So let's cover a few more of the tools on the right-hand side really quickly. We have the rectangular marquee tool. So if you want to select a bunch of pixels and move them around the screen, you can click there. There's also an elliptical select, and you can also use magic wand to select by color. So let's use rectangular marquee. I'm going to select a box, and now it's automatically going to kind of put the cursor in a move mode, which is what you see over here with the move tool. If I left click, I can drag this around the screen and position the same pixels anywhere we need them. Once again, note, it's only selecting pixels from the current layer. So if I drag a box over layer 2, but we're not working on layer 2, it's not going to affect those pixels. So if I go down to layer 2 now it will. Okay, the eyedropper tool, I kind of was showing that, but I didn't really explain it. So this is how you can select colors from anywhere in your document. So if I want to draw with, let's say, the blue, I can select the blue here, and that gets selected as the foreground color. Now I can hit B to go back into pencil tool, which is over here, and I can draw pixels of that color. So you can always hit Alt to do a eyedropper tool to select any color that you've been using on your document. So that's really handy if there's, let's say, 4 or 5 colors that you keep using a lot of, and you don't want to have to go all the way over to the palette. So the paint bucket tool is going to fill in an area until it reaches a boundary indicated by colored in pixels. So if I hit B, go over here, left click to draw a pixel, hold shift to draw a line, and I just make a box over here. Now you hit G to go to paint bucket tool mode, and let's select another color, and I fill it in. Well, because there's a boundary here, it's only going to fill in that box. But if I fill in outside of the boundary, or if I fill inside the boundary, but I'm clicking on a separate layer that doesn't actually have these pixels, well, it's going to fill in everything. Because when you're working on a layer, only that layer is taken into consideration for both destroying the pixels or overwriting them or deleting the entire layer in general. So the line tool is just another way you can draw lines. So you can left click and draw your line by pulling to the second point where the line should end. It's really the same thing as being in pencil tool mode. Left clicking, holding shift, and then dragging it down here. But you don't have to hold shift. You can just left click and draw a point out. Then you can also draw shapes. So you have rectangle tool, which does not fill in the rectangle, filled rectangle tool, ellipse tool for circles or oval shapes, and then filled ellipse, which is the same thing except it fills in all the pixels. So let's select another color here. I'm actually going to hit Shift N to go to a new layer just in case. Let's use the ellipse tool, left click, and then drag to the second point, and it will create a oval shape between those points. So obviously with the oval, as long as you have the same height and width, you can get a circle shape, or at least the closest representation that you can get with pixel art, since obviously you're working with very few pixels. Then filled rectangles tool, well, very similar. When we let go, it's going to fill in the pixels, but basically it's just drawing a box. So there's a few other tools over here that we're just going to gloss over for this video. And then on Aseprite, there are a bunch of functions that are handy for you as you start working with it, such as in the Edits menu, you can flip a layer horizontally. So if you need to reverse its direction, that's pretty handy. And under Edit Effects, you can add an outline to a layer or a character that you've already drawn. Maybe you want it with a black or a very dark blue outline around it. So that can be a handy tool there, so you don't have to manually pixel in the outline. But in a nutshell, Aseprite is a pretty straightforward program. It tries to make it very user-friendly for creating pixel art. So hopefully this video got you guys introduced to the program and you have a good idea of how to use it now. I've been Chris, thanks for watching, and I will see all of you in my future video content.